Chapter 1. The Forgotten Song, the Montclair. Hotel ballroom shimmered like a gilded cage, its crystal chandeliers scattering light across the sea of champagne flutes and polished smiles. I adjusted the strap of my emerald green dress, the one James had complimented with an absent, "That color works on you," and resisted the urge to check my watch for the third time in 10 minutes. The fabric clung uncomfortably to my back, dampened by the oppressive heat of too many bodies in too small a space. Claire! James appeared at my elbow, his breath warm with 18-year Macallan. He pressed a fresh gin and tonic into my hand without asking. Warren's wife is asking about the modernist gala. Try not to get too technical. She's more of a landscapes person. His fingers brushed the small of my back, a familiar gesture that felt more like ownership than affection after 15 years. I swallowed the sharp retort that rose to my lips. "I'll dumb it down," I said instead, forcing the same practiced smile I used when donors called Monet pretty, or asked if Van Gogh's sunflowers were actually lilies. A discordant piano chord cut through the murmur of conversation. Near the grand piano, a red-faced man in an ill-fitting tuxedo was butchering Cole Porters night and day. The crowd politely ignored him, except for one figure leaning against the piano's polished flank. Dark hair, navy suit, an expression of quiet amusement as he watched the spectacle. When his gaze drifted and met mine, he raised his glass in a silent toast to our shared suffering. I looked away first. James was already steering me toward Warren's table when a voice spoke behind me. The Delacroix restoration was revolutionary. I turned. The man from the piano stood barely an arm's length away, holding out another gin and tonic to replace the one I'd barely touched. "You're Claire Whitmore." Not a question. "I read your paper on pigment analysis in 19th century French oils." The glass was cold in my suddenly steady hand. "That was in an obscure conservation journal." "Daniel Carter." His cufflinks caught the light. Simple onyx squares, the kind a man buys for himself, rather than receives as gifts. And I have a pathological interest in obscure things. The conversation that followed unfolded in fragments I would turn over in my mind for weeks. His hands when he described seeing the raft of the Medusa at 18. The brush strokes looked like screams made visible. The scar through his left eyebrow from a childhood bicycle accident. The way he quoted Neruda's "Tonight I can write in serviceable Spanish after I mentioned Madrid." His accent rough, but the rhythm perfect. James drifted in and out like a spectre, squeezing my shoulder before being pulled into another discussion of quarterly projections. Each time he left, Daniel's questions grew sharper. Why art conservation? Does James ever visit you at the lab? When was the last time someone listened to you? The third gin and tonic burned my throat. "You're overstepping." "Am I?" He plucked an olive from my abandoned appetizer plate. "Then tell me to walk away." The piano switched too, as time goes by. At 11:37 p.m., while James debated golf handicaps with the CFO, Daniel brushed past me toward the terrace. His jacket sleeve whispered against my bare arm. "Page 112, he murmured without stopping. In the Uber home, I pretended to doze while James scrolled through emails. My fingers found the novel in my purse. The Shadow of the Wind, bought for the flight to Chicago I'd cancelled last month when James needed me at the Andersons' dinner. Page 112 held a single underlined passage. "There are no second chances in life, except to feel remorse." The car hit a pothole. James cursed. I pressed the page to my nose and inhaled the faint trace of bergamot and something indefinably male. 3:17 a.m. James snored softly beside me, one arm flung across my pillow. My phone glowed in the dark as I searched. Daniel Carter, VP of Development, EMEA, Harvard MBA, fluent in Spanish-Portuguese. Engagement dissolved 2018, per New York Times Style section. The article photo showed him at a gallery opening, his hand resting on the lower back of a willowy blonde. His smile was perfect. His eyes were dead. I opened a new tab, typed, "Tonight, I can write." Neruda analysis. The screen scrolled to a line I'd forgotten. Love is so short. Forgetting is so long. Outside, a siren wailed. Somewhere in the city, Daniel Carter was either sleeping or awake, waiting or indifferent. I rolled toward James, pressing my face into the cotton of his pajamas, where they still smelled faintly of the lavender detergent his mother had used. The guilt came, sharp and familiar. But underneath, a hunger so old it felt like remembering. Chapter 2. The weight of wanting. The shrill beeping of James's alarm shattered the fragile silence of dawn. I kept my eyes closed, feigning sleep as he moved through his morning ritual. The quiet shuffle of slippers across hardwood, the measured pour of water into the coffee maker, the familiar click of his briefcase latch. The scent of French roast crept under our bedroom door, mingling with the lavender fabric softener on his pillowcase. "Claire?" His voice was soft, testing. "You awake?" I made a non-committal noise into my pillow. "Dryden dinner's at 7. I'll be back by 6 to change." His lips brushed my temple, a gesture so routine it barely registered. The front door closed with a decisive click. Only then did I open my eyes. Sunlight filtered through the gaps in our blackout curtains, striping the duvet with gold. My phone glowed on the nightstand, 7:23 a.m. 12 new emails, 3 calendar reminders, and 1 unread message with no subject line. My thumb hovered over the screen. The bookstore's address appeared beneath a single line. The quiet ones always have the most to say. 2 p.m. I pressed the phone to my chest. The Dryden dinner loomed in 7 hours. James expected me ready by 6. That gave me exactly 4 hours of unaccounted time. 4 hours to decide whether to cross a line that, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. The shower ran scalding hot. Steam fogged the mirrors as I scrubbed last night's gala from my skin. The cloying perfume of society wives. The ghost of Daniel's bergamot cologne on my wrist where he'd brushed against me. My fingers trembled as they traced the paperback's indented words still visible on my damp skin. There are no second chances in life, except to feel remorse. I dressed carefully, dark jeans, a cashmere sweater James had bought me last Christmas, boots with just enough heel to feel confident, but not enough to draw attention. The outfit said errands, not affair. Normal, unremarkable. The bookshop appeared at the end of a derelict block, squeezed between a pawnshop and a shuttered bakery. Le Passeur read the peeling gilt letters above the door, French for the ferryman. The bell jingled as I entered, the sound swallowed by towering shelves of leather-bound volumes. Vanilla and vetiver clung to the air, undercut by the acrid tang of aging paper. "Looking for something specific?" Daniel emerged from the philosophy section, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a first edition of Camus' The Fall, balanced in his palm. Today he wore no tie, just a white Oxford unbuttoned at the throat, where a silver chain glinted. The scar through his eyebrow seemed more pronounced in the dusty light. "You know I am." My voice came out steadier than I felt. He smiled then, slow and knowing, and set the book aside. Follow me. The back room was a cathedral of forgotten stories. Sunlight streamed through a grimy skylight, illuminating floating dust motes and a threadbare Persian rug. A brass kettle whistled on a hot plate beside two mismatched armchairs. You come here often? I asked, perching on the chair's edge. Own the place. He poured tea into chipped porcelain cups. Bought it last year when they were about to turn it into a vape shop. The revelation startled me. Why? Same reason you restored that vandalized Rothko at MoMA. He handed me a cup. Some things deserve to outlast the people who don't understand them. The tea burned my tongue. Earl Grey with a hint of something smoky. Outside, a car backfired. Inside, the silence stretched taut between us. You didn't bring me here to talk about books. Daniel set down his cup. No. He crossed the room in 3 strides. When his fingers grazed my jawline, I didn't pull away. When his thumb brushed my lower lip, I let him. The first kiss tasted like tea and recklessness, and 15 years of suppressed yearning. The bell above the shop door jingled. We broke apart. My pulse roared in my ears. Stay, Daniel murmured against my temple. I reached for my purse. I can't. The Dryden's penthouse glittered with imported crystal and carefully curated conversation. James pressed a gin and tonic into my hand, his peace offering for arriving 20 minutes late. You okay? He frowned at my flushed cheeks. You look... Hot flash. I gulped the drink. Perimenopause. Across the room, Warren Dryden held court near the ice sculpture, and beside him, chatting easily with the mayor's wife, stood Daniel. His eyes found mine over the rim of his whiskey glass. Page 137, he mouthed. I excused myself to the ladies' room and locked the stall door. My reflection in the gilt mirror looked unfamiliar. Lips slightly swollen, pupils dilated, the cashmere sweater now suffocating. I turned on the tap and splashed cold water on my burning face. The book's passage floated behind my eyelids. We all have a secret buried under the words. When I emerged, Daniel was waiting by the elevators. Tomorrow, he said quietly, pressing a key into my palm. Noon. The address is engraved. The metal bit into my skin. James called my name from down the hall. I dropped the key down my bra just as my husband rounded the corner. V3:17 a.m. again. James snored beside me while I stared at the ceiling. The key lay heavy under my pillow, its teeth leaving indentations on my thigh where I'd pressed it earlier. On my phone screen, search history. How long do affairs last on average? Divorce laws? New York infidelity? Can you die from wanting too much? The last search made me smile in the dark. Neruda had asked the same question, just prettier. Outside, a siren wailed. Somewhere in the city, Daniel Carter was either sleeping or awake, waiting or indifferent. I rolled toward James, pressing my face into the cotton of his pajamas, where they still smelled faintly of the lavender detergent his mother had used. The guilt came, sharp and familiar. But underneath, a hunger so old it felt like coming home. Chapter 3. The Breaking Point. The key burned a hole in my pocket all morning. I traced its edges through the fabric of my jeans as I moved through the motions of domesticity, packing James's lunch, straightening the throw pillows he always left askew, wiping non-existent dust from the photo frames lining our hallway. Our wedding photos stared back at me, frozen in time. James grinning in his tuxedo, me in that ridiculous puff-sleeved dress that had been my mother's choice, not mine. We looked like strangers playing dress-up. At 11:47 a.m., I stood in front of the address engraved on the key. A nondescript brownstone in the West Village, its black door gleaming under the weak autumn sun. My finger hovered over the buzzer. Then, remembering the key in my hand, I slipped it into the lock instead. The apartment was all exposed brick and hardwood floors, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. A grand piano dominated the living room, its lid propped open like an invitation. Sheet music for Debussy's Clair de Lune sat on the stand, the notes smudged from frequent use. "You play?" Daniel's voice came from the doorway behind me. He leaned against the frame, barefoot, wearing only black sweatpants and a white t-shirt stretched thin across his shoulders. His hair was damp, as if he'd just stepped out of the shower. "Not well," I admitted. He crossed the room in silence, his bare feet whispering against the wood. When he sat at the piano, his fingers hovered over the keys for a breathless moment before descending into the opening notes of Clair de Lune. The music filled the apartment, liquid and aching. I closed my eyes. When was the last time someone had played for me? When was the last time I'd let myself just feel something without analyzing it to death? The music stopped abruptly. I opened my eyes to find Daniel watching me, his expression unreadable. "Why did you bring me here?" My voice sounded raw, scraped clean. He stood slowly, closing the distance between us. "Because I wanted to see what you look like in sunlight." His fingers brushed my cheek, tentative, as if I might break or disappear. When I didn't pull away, his touch grew bolder, tracing the line of my jaw, the curve of my neck, the hollow at the base of my throat, where my pulse fluttered like a caged bird. The kiss, when it came, was nothing like the chaste brush of lips at the bookstore. This was hunger and heat, and 15 years of pent-up longing. His hands tangled in my hair, mine fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer until there was no space left between us. Somehow we ended up on the floor, the hardwood digging into my knees, his mouth hot on my collarbone. His fingers made quick work of my buttons, his breath catching when the fabric fell away. "Claire," he murmured against my skin, and the way he said my name, like a prayer, like a curse, undid me completely. Afterward, we lay tangled together on the rug, the afternoon sun painting our bodies gold. Daniel traced idle patterns on my bare shoulder while I stared at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the weight of what we'd just done. "You're thinking too loud," he said, pressing a kiss to my temple. I turned my face into his chest, breathing in the scent of him, soap and sweat and something uniquely Daniel. "This was a mistake," he stilled. "Was it?" I didn't answer. The truth was too complicated, too messy. Outside, a car horn blared, the sound jarring in the quiet apartment. Reality came crashing back in. James would be home by 6. The Drydens would expect us at 7. There were groceries to buy, a dry cleaning pickup to schedule, a life to pretend was still mine. I sat up abruptly, reaching for my discarded clothes. Daniel watched me dress in silence, his expression unreadable. At the door, I hesitated. His voice stopped me before I could leave. "Page 212, he said softly. I didn't turn around. The door clicked shut behind me, the sound final. On the subway home, I pulled out the shadow of the wind with trembling hands. Page 212 held a single underlined passage. There are moments when the heart is so full that silence is the only answer. I closed the book, pressing it to my chest as the train rattled onward, carrying me back to a life that no longer fit. Chapter 4. The reckoning rain lashed against the windows of our Brooklyn brownstone, turning the glass into a distorted mirror where my reflection wavered like a ghost. I stood at the kitchen island, methodically chopping vegetables for a salad I knew James wouldn't eat. The knife made sharp, precise sounds against the cutting board, too loud in the suffocating silence. 3 days had passed since the piano, the sunlight, the way Daniel's hands had mapped my skin like he was memorizing me. 3 days of jumping at every text notification, of showering twice daily to erase his scent, of lying awake beside James while my mind replayed every stolen moment in excruciating detail. The knife slipped. A bright bead of blood welled on my fingertip. I watched it bloom with detached fascination, the pain sharp and clean compared to the mess in my chest. Shit, Claire. James materialized beside me, grabbing a paper towel. He pressed it to my finger with surprising gentleness. You've been distracted all week. His wedding band glinted under the kitchen lights as he tended to my cut. The same hands that had once traced my cheekbones with reverence now moved with clinical efficiency. When had we become this? Roommates? Playing at marriage? Going through motions worn smooth by time? I'm fine, I lied, pulling my hand away. Just tired. James studied me, his hazel eyes, lighter than Daniel's, less intense, narrowing slightly. For one terrifying second, I thought he knew. Then his phone buzzed, and the moment shattered. Damn it! He scowled at the screen. Emergency meeting, don't wait up. He was gone before I could respond, the front door closing with finality behind him. The salad sat abandoned on the counter, my blood smearing the cucumber slices. I reached for my phone. I need to see you. Daniel's reply came before I could second-guess myself. The ferryman waits. Le Passeur looked different at night. The warm glow from the antique lamps cast long shadows between the bookshelves, transforming the shop into something out of a Gothic novel. The bell above the door jingled as I entered, the sound swallowed by the storm raging outside. Daniel stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled up to reveal the delicate script of a Neruda line inked along his forearm. Love is so short, forgetting is so long. His hand stilled on the ledger he'd been writing in when he saw me. You came. Rain dripped from my coat onto the hardwood. I don't know what I'm doing. He closed the ledger with deliberate slowness. Yes, you do. The air between us crackled with everything unsaid. My skin remembered his touch. My lips still tingled from his kisses. But standing there in the dim light, with the scent of old books and bergamot wrapping around us, all I could think was, this is the point of no return. Daniel rounded the counter, stopping just out of reach. Tell me to walk away, he murmured, echoing our first real conversation. Say the word, and I disappear. I should have said it. Should have turned around and walked back into the rain, back to the life I'd built. But when his fingers brushed mine, just the lightest graze, something in me fractured. The ledger hit the floor with a thud as I pulled him to me. His mouth crashed against mine, hungry and desperate, hands fisting in my rain-damp hair. We stumbled through the shop, knocking over stacks of books until my back hit the philosophy section. Claire, he breathed against my neck, and the way he said my name, like a prayer and a plea, undid me completely. Afterward, we lay tangled together on the Persian rug in the back room, the storm still raging outside. Daniel traced idle circles on my bare shoulder, his touch feather-light. You're shaking, he observed. I was. Not from cold or regret, but from the terrifying realization that I couldn't go back. That this, whatever this was, had changed everything. Daniel propped himself up on one elbow, studying my face with that unnerving focus of his. "What do you want, Claire?" The question hung between us, simple and impossible. I thought of James's empty side of the bed, of the way we'd become strangers sharing a home, of 15 years measured in silent dinners and perfunctory kisses. Then I looked at Daniel, at the way his dark eyes held mine like I was the only thing that mattered, and the truth clawed its way up my throat. I want to choose myself for once. The words tasted foreign, dangerous, freeing. Daniel brushed a tear from my cheek with his thumb. Then choose. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. Somewhere in the city, James was sitting in a conference room, oblivious to the earthquake reshaping our lives. And here I was, naked on a borrowed rug, at the precipice of a decision that would shatter everything. I reached for my clothes. Daniel didn't stop me this time. He just watched as I dressed, his expression unreadable. When I paused at the door, he didn't offer a page number or a promise. Just a quiet, "Whatever you decide." The rain had stopped when I stepped outside. The air smelled like wet pavement and possibility. Somewhere in the distance, a street musician played a mournful tune on a violin. I took a deep breath and began to walk. Not toward home, not toward Daniel, but somewhere entirely new. Chapter 5. The space between. The apartment was dark when I returned. No lights in the windows, no sound of the television murmuring from the living room. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint scent of James's cologne lingering in the air. Something woodsy and expensive that I'd picked out for him 3 birthdays ago. I stood in the foyer, my key still clutched in my hand, rain dripping from my coat onto the hardwood. The silence was oppressive, like the apartment itself was holding its breath. My phone buzzed in my pocket. "Did you make it home?" Daniel's text glowed up at me in the dim light. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the screen. The right answer was yes. The honest answer was, "I don't know where home is anymore." I didn't reply. Instead, I moved through the apartment like a ghost, trailing my fingers over the familiar things. The framed wedding photo on the mantel, the stack of art books on the coffee table, the half-empty wine glass James had left on the kitchen counter before his emergency meeting. The life we'd built together felt like a museum exhibit, carefully preserved but no longer lived in. The bedroom door creaked when I pushed it open. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, illuminating the bed where James lay sleeping, one arm thrown over his eyes. He'd changed out of his work clothes. The suit jacket draped over the chair, the tie loosened at the collar. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping slightly under my weight. James stirred, but didn't wake. For 15 years, this had been my place, right here, beside him. It had been easy, comfortable, safe. And now? Now I felt like a stranger in my own skin. I reached out, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. He murmured something unintelligible in his sleep and turned toward my touch. My throat tightened. The clock on the nightstand ticked past midnight. Somewhere across the city, Daniel was probably lying awake too, staring at his phone, waiting for a reply that wouldn't come. And me, I was caught in the space between what was and what could be, between the life I knew and the one I was too afraid to reach for. I slipped under the covers beside James, careful not to wake him. His body heat radiated against my back as I curled into myself, staring at the sliver of moonlight cutting across the wall. The phone on my nightstand remained silent. Outside, The city hummed with its endless rhythm. Cars passing, sirens wailing, lives intersecting and diverging in the dark. And in the quiet of our bedroom, with James's steady breathing beside me, I made my choice. For tonight, at least. Tomorrow was another story.